Right, just before we crack on with this episode, just a quick word about our sponsor, KS Civils and Groundworks Limited, based in Leeds. They have over 296 years of combined experience in civil engineering and groundworks. Led by Director Carl Smith, their team is known for honesty, reliability and commitment to the highest safety and quality standards. They're proudly ISO accredited and fully CHAS Elite accredited. No matter the size of your project, KS Civils and Groundworks delivers professional, trustworthy service you can rely on. To learn more, visit kscivilsandgroundworks.co.uk. Now let's dive back into this episode. Hi, welcome back to the podcast. Tonight I'm talking to Gavin Stone. Now, Gavin was a security operative working with the likes of MI5, MI6, the MOD. He's an author, both of fiction and non-fiction books. And also, well, I'll let him tell you about the rest of his story. I won't go into it. Hey, Gavin, how are you doing?
I'm all good. Thank you for having me on here.
Now, honestly, like I said to everyone, it's great when people, I ask them, I chase them, and they agree to it. Some people I'll chase for a lot longer, and I think they just give in because I've been badgering them for so long.
Fair play.
What I didn't explain in the intro there was that you're not military, you're not a veteran. So I normally interview veterans. So my 5 questions that I normally ask that everybody knows is kind of out the window. But we'll go like the same format type of thing. So, you know, where did you grow up? What made you do what you ended up doing? What was that like? And the things that you can tell us about. I know there'll be lots you can't. And what made you want to become an author as well? I'm quite interested in that. And what have you done ever since? So if you just want to give the listeners and viewers a bit of a background about what it was like growing up and what led you into the field.
Sound. So, I'll start off. I was born in Wolverhampton, so that's probably, well, it's definitely why I've got an affinity to wolves. I'm a wolf lover. So there's probably 1 or 2 people already out there going, cringing at the screaming at their football teams and that kind of thing. But yeah.
I think they've just turned off and buggered off, mate.
No, that's it, yeah. I've just killed your podcast for you now. Sorry, mate.
That's 50% of them gone.
So unfortunately, for my sins, but I was one of the few people that did have the sense to actually leave Wolverhampton. I now live down on the southwest coast, but I've lived all over. I've lived in America and London and Scotland and all over the show. So, but yeah, born and raised up there in the Midlands, big city. I got on the fringes of doing a lot of things that I shouldn't be doing. The usual story with a lot of fellas I found in like kind of intelligence and the military have got a very similar backstory. They're right on the fringes of a decision, or they're going down a bad route, and they pick one way or the other. A lot of the greatest military guys I know, some of the special forces guys I know, we're right on the border of going into a really bad direction. And myself, I was one of them. I was doing the wrong thing, and I made a decision. I said, I don't want my life to be like this. I don't want to be who I'm turning into. And that was where, I decided to turn my life around, as it were. So, but as for joining up, it was pretty much accidental. So it wasn't the usual way that it's done. So most guys who work for the likes of MI6 and that kind of thing, they get a tap on the shoulder at college. They get spotted by a talent spotter, and it goes through a particular process. And then they call them in and say, look, do you want to serve your country? Maybe not in the military, but in a different way that we think you'd be useful. And I started in the private end, in private investigations and people finding, people tracing and that kind of thing. And it all kind of just escalated. I started off with process serving, and that then led to marital investigations, which led to fraud investigations, and it just went up and up and up. And then I ended up with real low-end government contracts, like kind of, people like benefit frauds and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it just seemed to go from one thing to another. And then at some point I did a lot of covert surveillance, and my broker, he said, look, I'm going to put you in with this team and that team. And before I knew it, I was working with some big players because I was one of the few people who was just willing to up and go at the click of a finger, look, can you get to France? Can you be in Paris tomorrow, ready to spend 2 weeks and be prepared to be there for 9? And, I could get up and do that. And after a while, he said to me, you do know who you've been working for, don't you? And I said, I've got an inkling. So, over time, I kind of rubbed shoulders with the right people. and eventually got taken on full time on the books working for the MOD, but actually didn't like it as much as doing the contracting that I did, and I went back to contracting. A lot much more fun.
So was that because of lack of freedom or too many rules? Or
Yeah, so I mean, so not the first, but one of the first assignments that I was ever given. I was sat down, and they said to me, "Find out how the Russians are getting railgun information out of Korea." Okay, and I waited a moment. I wasn't given any gadgets or an Aston Martin, and I wasn't given an exploding watch or anything else like that. Instead, what I got was, "What the hell are you still doing here?" Only not quite as polite. So yeah, that was as much as I had to go off. So they sent me out, and I got to work, and 2 or 3 days later, had a result come back and give them the report. So, and in all honesty, looking back in hindsight now, I think a lot of the time they were giving me jobs which were like, "If you can pull this off, we'll keep him," and I kept pulling it off.
so every job was a test type of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, going back to like the private investigator days and stuff like that, and I mean, did you ever feel on some of the cases that you were on that, how can I put this, that maybe you felt uncomfortable because you thought the person, say you were investigating in a, I don't know, say a divorce or whatever like that, you felt sorry for your mark instead of the client type of thing?
Not really, but there was one which I wasn't sure how to handle. One that comes to mind where I was hired by a wife by the client. She thought that her husband was having an affair. And this was where I had a really awkward dilemma because she had good grounds because he was lying to her. He was lying to her about where he was going and who he was seeing and lots of other things. And she called me in and she said, "Look, can you look into this, please?" I said, "Yeah, sure." So I did the investigations. And what happened was there was a lot of definitive, he was telling her he was at the office when he wasn't. He was telling her he was at different places when he was calling to see people. But there was no usual pattern that you get when someone's having an affair. Like if someone's having an affair, they either go from work to a hotel or a bar, meet their other interest, spend a few hours. And there was none of that. It was different random places and random shopping trips and things that didn't quite add up. So I had to dig a lot deeper. And what I found out was he'd been planning for quite some time to get round ease, with ease and discretion, and arrange a surprise birthday party for his wife.
Oh,
and that left me in such a position because I had to go back and I thought, well, what do I do? I can't say he's having an affair because he's not. I can't say he's not lying to her because he is. She's asked me to find out what's going on, and I can't go back and say, "Look, he's arranging a surprise birthday party for you," because that's going to ruin the whole thing. So I was really, really stuck in a very awkward position with that one. So when you talk about like the ethical dilemma and the moral kind of, do you feel sorry for your mark on that occasion? Yes, that was probably the exception where I did.
I mean, I can imagine the usual type of surveillance that you're doing. You can't have any feelings. You can't be thinking, and they're there for you're there for a reason. Keep an eye on them, or find them, or whatever. You can't really humanize them, if that's the right word.
Not really. I mean, like I say, it's a case of finding out what they're doing. So you do have to establish, patterns of life and kind of get inside their head a little bit and inside their life and get to know what they're liable to be doing and fill in the gaps yourself kind of thing. So, and the truth of the matter is, probably 8 times out of 10, if somebody's been hired because they believe somebody might be having an affair, they usually are. It's just then a case of the final elements of proof that they need. They've got the suspicions, now they just want proof. And it is usually the case. So it's very rare it's anything otherwise. So
what's the process for getting into being a private investigator? Is there a license? Is there qualifications? I have no idea whatsoever.
There are courses and that kind of thing for it, but believe it or not, there's actually no licensing at all whatsoever for private investigation. There's not. You can literally rent an office, buy a camera, get some cards printed, and say I'm a private investigator. That is it. It's
So there's
not
nothing like an SIA license or
no,
anything like
no
that. So
SIA, nothing, no regulatory body, nothing. The SIA have been trying to get in on it for some time, and I say that I'd like to double check, and if anybody can kind of say anything otherwise, just in case, because they have been trying for some time to make it regulated by the SIA, but I don't think they were ever successful. But if anybody does find out and can prove me wrong, then please let me know, because the last time I checked there was no license or anything for it. But there are lots of courses you can do and lots of training you can get for this kind of thing. But it is an easy world to get into. That was not the case with me. I actually had a knock on the door from a friend, and he said, "Gavin, look, you're one of the most resourceful people I know. Can you help me out with something?" I said, "Yeah. What do you want?" He said, "I need to find somebody." I said, "Okay," and we spent the day, and I did helped him out, and didn't really think too much of it. It was job done, and I went home, and it was just after the beginning of the next month. He brought a big envelope full of cash round. He said, "There you go." I said, "What's this?" He said, "You remember that person you helped me find?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, that's your half of the fee for finding him." And I looked at this envelope of cash, and I was like, "Got any more of them people you won't find him?" And as it turns out, we were doing something called process serving. And this is where you've got to deliver usually a court summons.
yeah,
And what happens is sometimes they'll send a court summons out. They'll think they're outsmarting the legal system by writing "not at this address" on the envelope and chuck it back in the post. And then what happens then? They hire somebody like me to then go out and do what they call a per serve and personally serve them. So you knock on the door, you say, "Mr. Smith, yep, this is for you," and you hand it to them, and job done. And it's the bread and butter stuff of the private investigation industry.
I mean, what was it like the first few times you did that? I can imagine it being quite nervous.
Very, yeah. Because people ask questions. You hand them an envelope. You say, "This is for you," and they go, "What is it?" I'm not allowed to say. I don't. And I have to say, I don't actually know what's in the envelope. I've just been hired to give it to you. And of course, when they open it up, they kind of, they see it's a court summons. I've had them rip it to shreds in front of me, throw it at me, chase me up the street, and all sorts of things. But the thing is, as long as I've done my job, I don't care. So, but yeah, the first few times, it was very nerve wracking, because you don't know who's going to be the other side of the door. You don't know what they're going to react or how they're going to react, and and whatever else. And some of them do get a bit angry, to say the least. So, but over time, you start to get used to it, and you start to get a little bit of what do they say? Exposure equals composure.
Yeah. So I mean, moving into like when you say you moved on like towards the MOD side of it, the more sneaky beaky stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Did they provide any training or anything, or were you just expected to be able to sort your own craft out?
A lot of the time, it was stuff that I'd kind of, because I'd stepped up bit by bit. I'd learned private investigations, then I'd learned surveillance, and then they said, "Look, you're good at that. Do you want to try this?" Sometimes they'd provide training for me. Other times, it was just stuff that I already knew, and they said, "Do you know what you're doing?" And that was it. So what I found with the MOD, working with them directly, was there was a constant backlog of, "You need this, you need that, this has got to be signed off, that's got and that's one of the reasons I left. I'd gone from being told, "Go and find out this," and I could do anything I wanted in my own way, in my own time, to 3 emails, 2 letters, and a telephone call just to change my parking space.
Yeah.
So yeah, you've been through that.
Yeah, I know what it's like. Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to think out of where the next question. So the surveillance side of everything like that.
Mm-hmm.
How hard is that? What's the process of picking your mark, not being seen yourself?
Yeah, so
I know it's like being a grey man and sitting in the back, just keeping out of the way and stuff.
that's and a lot of people get it so wrong, especially with Hollywood, because Hollywood's visual. It has to show as much as you possibly can. But in all honesty, a lot of it's boring. It's sitting around. You're not doing anything. 99% of the time, you're bored, stiff. But that 1% is when it's all action, and that's when your heart's thumping. So, and the whole premise of absolutely everything you do will be completely dependent on each and every case. If you're working as a one-man band, it makes everything so much more difficult. If you're working as part of a team and you've got a bigger budget, it makes things a lot easier. And I've worked in all these different scenarios. When you're doing it on your own, it's really, really difficult. It's
I can
something.
imagine, yeah.
Oh yeah, especially if there's transitions. If people, I've had it where I've followed somebody for 2 or 3 mile only to find out they've just gone back to a parked car and driven off and left me, and I'm, you know. And of course, when when I did this, we were talking before we even had digital cameras and phones. Never mind drones. I mean, if we had drones when I was doing it, life would have been a lot easier.
Just stayed at home.
Exactly, it's done it all from my phone. But yeah, now obviously it's a lot easier with the tech that we've got. But back then it was, like I said, it's a one man team. It was one man band. It was very very hard. You could rely on certain trackers from time to time if you had time to plant them, or other than that, it was just quickly make a note of the car, make a note of as many details as you can, and then try and see if you can find out where it might be or where it went or whatever else. If you've got a team, it's great. You can radio through somebody, get a car around here quickly. He's gone this way, or it's very seldom like what they show on the movies, where they've got 100 people on one guy and satellites and drones and helicopters and everything and change the traffic lights. Yeah, I wish I could.
I was going to ask this one later on, but I mean, you just led into it there. So, I mean, the TV show that's out at the moment, Slow Horses.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's a fantastic show, but I would imagine nothing like reality. I can imagine the snippets in there.
Yeah,
they must have.
There's a lot of good nods to the service in there. I've got McKellar's book back there, actually. It's Slow Horses is brilliant. There's a lot of really good nods, and there are a lot of in fact, there was a friend of mine from MI6 who was actually the technical advisor on the set there with stuff like the surveillance and that kind of thing. But the dance you've got to do when you're showing it on set is obviously very, very difficult. You're chasing somebody and getting onto a bus and getting off and getting on the bus coming the other way and all that. It is something you're doing what they call an SDR, or surveillance detection route. And all these little tricks. Some are more crude than others, where you'll step onto the train and then just before the doors close you'll step off it again, and that's a little bit more crude. In reality, if you're doing that kind of thing, you want it to be so subtle that they don't even notice that they're following you 1 minute, the next minute you've gone, and where did he go? They've got no clue. If you're antagonising a surveillance team by doing the kind of drills like going round a roundabout twice and all that kind of thing you see on TV, it's not really the way it's done. They want to think it's just an average boring day. You're not up to anything, and they just happen to lose you. If they think you're up to something, that's when they're going to get twice the manpower and go, he's gone, he's slipped us, he's done it deliberately. Let's keep a close eye on him, find out where he went.
I mean, going back as well, you mentioned like trackers and stuff like that in the early days. I mean, obviously now you could order them off bloody Temu and TikTok and
yeah,
you know what I mean. You make your own with an Arduino or something if you really wanted to. How hard was stuff to get hold of like that?
It not only was it difficult, and it was a lot more expensive. It was a lot, more rare to kind of be given permission to even use it and that kind of thing. But even more so, it was big and it was clumpy and it was cumbersome. And I put a joke that we've said a few times in the industry where they go, it's great tech, and it's this, that, and the other, and they've said, the only damage it will do is if you drop it on your foot, and of course we're trying to put a tracker onto a car back then with big clumpy magnets and whatever else, and sometimes they'd have a 2-hour battery life or something crazy like that within so many miles, and it wasn't very effective, it wasn't very efficient. Now you can get little stuff, tiny little things that you can slip in a gap, and they work, absolutely brilliant, So we had to rely on very, very different methods back then. So if you were tailing a car at night, for example, you could just put a bit of black duct tape over the tail light at the back on the one side. Most drivers don't do a walk around when they get in the car. They're oblivious to it. They just get in and drive off. And what happens is if you've got a street full of traffic and you've only got one, they've all got 2 tail lights, but one's going to stand out because it's only got one, or it's got a dimmed one because of the duct tape. It helps. And if you haven't got time to do that, you could smash it with something, screwdriver to smash the bulb the other side of it, or to put the tail light out. Not the the most ethical thing to do. But it was silly things like that that would really, really help you, kind of be able to track a car. And then what we did a little bit later, if we were following somebody at night, do you guys remember the IR flashlight things that you could stick?
Yeah.
I forgot the name of them. The actual what's it now? But they were like a little green flashlight that you could pop the IR over and have it as a white light, or have it completely blacked out. We used to get something like that, and we could pop that under the car. Using whatever we could to get it to stick or strap or tie wrap it to the chassis underneath. And of course, you know as well as I do, you can be driving down the road at night time, and if you've got the IR binoculars, you can see that for miles flashing away.
Yeah.
Human eyes can't see it, but that really, really helps you when it comes to following stuff.
I mean, getting that onto someone's car, I mean, that's an operation in itself. Then the operation of following or whatever. And then you've got to get it off again.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is all. So here's a crazy fact for you. More spies are caught changing the batteries in bugs, listening devices, and electronic gadgets and that kind of thing than what they are actually planting them in the first place. and the reason being, they get more and more complacent every time they do it. So the first time they do it, they're really on edge. They've really got their guard up. They're really prepared. They've got their backstory in place, and they do it. They plant the listening device, and then they get out. They're like, whew, Second time, they're like, okay, I did it last time. And what happens is, bit by bit, the backstory to why they're in the room gets forgotten because they've done it before. They get more and more comfortable, more and more complacent, and that's when somebody walks in, catches them off guard, and they go, ugh, and they look all guilty. What are you doing here? And it all goes pear-shaped.
I mean, that leads on to the next question then is, what's the closest you've ever been to being caught? Or have you been caught?
I've been caught, yeah, and that wasn't nice. And that's a story I'll share with you off air some other day, if that's all right with you. Really don't want to go there because it's not family friendly.
Fair enough.
But I have had a few close calls as well, with different things, where I've managed to just slip away and evade any kind of problems, luckily, on several occasions. So, and that gets the heartbeat flowing as well. So, and usually,
I can imagine.
Yeah, with bits of kit like that, like the IR flashlight I was on about, just for example, I mean, if you're billing a private client, leave it on the car. It's easier just to leave it there and put it on their bill.
Yeah. You'll pay for it, mate. Yeah.
Exactly. Funnily enough, I remember there was a lad I was training the once, and this wasn't too long ago. And I said to him, when we go, this was an affair that the wife had thought the husband was having, which it was. We got the photos, and I said, right, go and get them printed out. I said, put them in a brown envelope. I said, we get the check, we leave the photos, we go. And he said, okay. And I said, mate, because I'm a detail freak with this kind of thing, so I expect them to do exactly what I tell them to do. And what he didn't do was get them printed. Instead, he thought he knew better by taking his iPad around and saying, I can just slide through them on the iPad. Of course, I knew exactly what was going to happen because I've done this so many times. And she's there and she's flicking, and I can see the red, and she's raging and getting more and more angry with each and every photo that she's looking at. And next thing you know, the iPad goes up the wall and she's screaming and shouting, going absolutely crazy. And that smash, and of course, I mean, that then led on to the denial mode of like, kind of, no, I don't believe it. I don't believe it's true. He couldn't do this to me. It's not real. And it just all went. I dragged him by the scruff of the neck and said, right, come on, lesson learned. And I explained to him, I said, that's why you get them printed. I said, you've done your job. You give them the photos. You go. That's it. Job done. Whatever emotional states come after that is nothing to do with us. We're finished. So, but he learned his lesson.
I was going to say, I mean, there must be times where emotions, like they said, like an affair or something like that, or has taken over, or you've been too engrossed in, and it's affected you later.
Yeah, I think the worst ones are when you're hired to find somebody and you have to deliver bad news. That's not only is it never pleasant, but when you find out, your heart sinks. And you think, well, if I feel this bad, how's it going to feel when I now go and tell the client, and that's the kind of work that I don't really like. And I mean, I've never failed to find somebody that I've been hired to find. I've got one kind of ongoing case at the minute, which I'm kind of doing remotely. I'm getting other people to work out in the field and send me the information back, as it were. But yeah, I've never failed to find somebody. But like I say, sometimes you can find somebody, but it's not necessarily going back to give the client the news they want to hear, which is always a bad, horrible situation.
I mean, do you think it's say like, all right, falling off the radar, I want to disappear, right? Do you think it's easier now or in years gone by? I mean, because like your digital footprint and stuff like that now,
yeah,
it's quite hard to just disappear.
It's a lot harder now than it was, but there are ways of doing it, and I mean, as long as you plan it properly and have it, everything the way that you want to get everything in place, and if you've got to avoid conventional travel, you've got to avoid big cities and that kind of thing, and you've got to have something in place. Like if you were going to disappear, go to the Philippines or something crazy like that. There's that many islands that if you spent a week on each and every island in the Philippines, you could live there for, I think it's something like 260 years and still not be and still not have visited the same island twice. So there's places like Japan where they can do a complete scrub and get you off the radar and make you completely vanish without trace. But where people go wrong is leaving the digital footprint in the first place. They start researching it on their own computer or logged in as themselves and things like that, or they start going to internet cafes where there's a record of them using the internet under their own name, things like that. It's if they share anything with their friends, it's a trail. So there's two ways of doing it. You can either leave loads of red herrings and loads of decoys around, or you can do it the other way where you leave no trace and just one day you've disappeared and nobody knows how or where you went, and that's it. And there are ways of doing it. One of the guys coming to my event, Visguard, they've got a CCTV system now. The tech that we've got is, forget facial recognition. You could walk into a building, take all your clothes off, put a fresh set of clothes on, a balaclava on, a hat on, cover yourself up completely, walk out the building, and in less than a second, it's already picked you up and recognises you again.
From your gait and stuff like
your hunch, your gait, your distance, your measurement. So it's 55 points of recognition it's on at the minute, and it's got you. Yeah, it can even tell you if you're carrying a weapon.
You know what? That's scary.
It is. It's really, really scary. I mean, back when I used to do a little bit of work in the field, London was one of the most CCTV heavy places that there ever was. But even the algorithms back then, even though they could pick you up by your walk, weren't as advanced as they are now. And we had a nice little simple system for it. We'd go down. There's a couple of different subway areas where you can go halfway down and you can drop off camera. And then what you do, you wait for the crowd to come back up, and you've changed, maybe a reversible jacket and put a cap on or hoodie or whatever and covered yourself up. And then what you do, you just simply undo the laces on your left boot. And that would be alone to disrupt your walk so that the CCTV algorithms couldn't pick you up. And that was the training that we had. It was really, really clever. They said, don't try and fake your walk because you'll naturally default back to how you normally walk, your normal gait and everything. They said, but if you just undo your lace on your left boot and make it really, really loose, your walk will naturally change because you'll be hyper conscious of it. Trying to keep your boot on your foot as you're walking. Now it's got really.
I've heard of people putting spoons in the shoes and stuff like that.
Yeah. There's different ways of doing it. Anything that adjusts your walk enough to stop the algorithms recognising it as how you used to be. And of course, the best way around London now, if you were to go to London and you wanted to kind of not be tracked by any of these algorithms, if you've got the right face coverings and you know what you're doing, is actually by bike, because you don't bob, you're a continual smooth kind of riding of the bike. Your pace, your gait doesn't change. The patterns aren't there to be able to pick up your walk or your hunch or anything else like that. So,
I mean, how do you stand on the aspect of that everyone's on camera? And freedom, your personal freedom. People, the digital ID card and this, that, and the other, all the buzzwords that are going around at the moment. I think personally, I don't give a damn.
Yeah.
You know,
I,
and
I, I don't, yeah, so I'm stuck here because I've been on both sides of the fence because I've worked for the services and I've seen the public and heard the public's point of view. And there's nothing worse when people don't know what you do, sitting in a room and you hear, they're slagging off the security services and whatever else. There's over 100 attempted attacks on the UK every single week. And they have to stop them. Now, don't get me wrong, some of these are just college kids wanting to try and make their school explode or whatever, and some of them are just dreamers. But there are a lot of serious threats out there. And the problem is you get all these do-gooders who, on one hand, they'll turn around and say, we want our privacy, you shouldn't be surveilling us, you shouldn't be listening to our phone calls, blah, 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 blah. So we get all these restrictions put in place. And then what happens is you have an incident that, there's a terror attack or there's a bomb goes off or something like that, something really, horrible happens. And then those same people are screaming, why weren't you watching him? Why weren't you doing anything about him? Why weren't you listening into phone calls? And it's like, because you've made it so hard for us to be able to do it, that's why. So there has to be a happy medium. I don't agree in the power being abused, but it's a very difficult area to police.
I can imagine. I mean, I would hope that the agencies that are here to protect, Great Britain, don't abuse the powers. But I can imagine individuals giving individual too much power. I mean,
that's the thing. Yeah.
I mean, for example, it was kind of common knowledge that when we were in Ireland in the towers, it was quite often we'd zoom into windows. Let's say, you know what I mean. And that was more out of enjoyment than surveillance. I'd even heard a story once of, and I don't know how true it is. I hope it is true. God, I love it to be true. There was a known player whose wife was having a bit of an affair, and they could see her from one of the Romeo towers. So they videoed it. And then the next patroller went past his house, posted the videotape through the letterbox.
Ooh.
I can imagine there was they weren't watching Coronation Street that night. I don't know how true that is. Probably a modern myth, but I would love something like that to be true. But it does show that it can be easily abused.
Yeah,
even if it's just off a bored person who's type of thing.
Yeah, I mean, the majority of the time, everybody has to go through like so many layers of screening and regular psych evals and checks and that kind of thing. It's constant, and it's a good thing in some ways. The majority of the time, but there are other times. At MI5, when you go into MI5 in the main area, there's this great big plaque, and it's got Regnum Defende, in defence of the realm. And the saying in Thames House is Rectum Defende. I think cover one's arse, and that's the main thing amongst the boys in that club. They kind of want to make sure that they've got their rear end covered more importantly than anything else. But as with anything and everything, there's always a little bit of larking about. But on the flip side of it, no, we're not looking at everybody's cat pictures. We're not going online and listening to everybody and everything everywhere all the time. We just wouldn't have and don't have the manpower in order to do that. And we really don't care about your uncle's party, and we don't care about your stepsister sleeping with your cousin and whatever else. It's not what we're looking for. Don't get me wrong. There's always going to be that time where they search something and go, "Oh, did you see this?" And they go, "Oh, that's a bit cheeky." But then it's kind of laughed about, joked about, and brushed on, and then move on to getting back to work again.
I mean, you're on about monitoring and stuff like that. I mean, yeah. I work in IT, so I don't security sides and stuff like that. Kind of, get involved in that just as I provide IT support and stuff.
Yeah.
But I've been into computers for a long, long time, and I remember years and years and years and years ago. There was a rumor, or I don't know how true it was, that there was software called Doberman that basically monitored all email traffic coming in and out of the UK and stuff like that. I'd be quite naive to say that doesn't exist or something similar. Stuff going through GCHQ, searching for certain words and things like that. I mean, we see it in the books and in the TV shows and in the movies and stuff. But I know there's got to be something like that happening.
Yeah, so there's a version of it, and a lot of it. there's two sides to this. The first side is if there is a person of interest that we've spotted and said we better keep an eye on him, then that's kind of direct surveillance on that individual, right? We then might look into his own emails, see what websites he's visiting, see where he's going, who he's talking to, and establish patterns of life and see if there's any danger or potential danger with that individual. Then there's the other side of it, and this is more like what you're on about now, where all communications go through, for want of a better word, a kind of digital filter. And what that does is it picks up certain buzzwords or certain veiled speech or certain things that they go, there's too many things there that look suspicious. And the algorithms in the computers that they've got, years ago, if you were just on the phone in the 1980s and 90s and said the words London bomb and Queen in one phone call, you'd have the police around your house in around about an hour. In this day and age, it's got a hell of a lot more intelligent than that, and it can even pick up veiled speech and kind of intentional plans, and it'll look at communications, irrational communications. If you've got a UK number that keeps dialing Syria, or you've got a UK number that is doing particular things that doesn't add up with the rest of what it normally does, or whatever the case may be, they'll start saying the flags will go up and they'll say let's have a closer look. So, but a lot of that's all done digitally. It's all done remotely. It's not until the machine picks a red flag that it says, right, send this to human eyes, then a human has a look and goes, oh, no, I don't think we need to worry about it. Or, actually, yeah, I better pass that on for somebody to look into.
I mean, I can imagine, though, you've picked up on someone and you need to get down and dirty with their digital footprint type of thing. And the ISPs have to agree to this and, to provide, or do they? I know, like in Sweden and places like the laws are different.
Yeah. A lot of the time,
GDPR and all that.
Yeah, so the majority of the time they are kind of, I wouldn't say partnered. That would be the wrong choice of words. And so I'll go back to when I used to work in the field doing anything like this. And this was back when they used to do what they call tapping a telephone line. You'd have to get something called a HOW, which is a Home Office Warrant, and it was a lot harder to get. And there was this constant catch-22 situation of get us the evidence and we'll give you a warrant. And you say, well, I need the warrant to get the evidence, and you'd go around in circles 9 times out of 10. And sometimes we had to be a little bit naughty and kind of plant the device or put the tap like with the warrant pending, knowing that we had to take a chance and that was it. So nowadays it's judicial, it's completely different. You don't have to go to the Home Office. It's all done through a judge. It's a lot quicker. It's a lot easier. And if you've got, probable cause or good reason, you can get it sorted in no time at all. And you're pretty much good to go. Now with the likes of the communications companies, and again, my area was human intelligence gathering, so I didn't do so much with, I had certain dealings with GCHQ or whoever the intelligence was coming from. But I imagine now, I know that the likes of BT has a section devoted to working with the intelligence agencies and that kind of thing. So I imagine the internet service providers are probably pretty much okay. If you're going to ask them for something, you're going with a reason. Yeah. So
you don't just want to see we've been looking on porn sites here.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm talking about like the difference between the digital and the human side. I mean, human. I'll start that again. Human intelligence. It's the bread and butter of it all, really, isn't it? Yeah. Especially if you're going out in other countries and getting involved with the locals, and things like that. How did you find working in other countries? And was there any specialist training they had to do to go there?
Oh yes. Now this is a different. Now we're getting deep into the nitty gritty of human intelligence gathering. And this is different to your private investigation stuff. This is where you are literally recruiting somebody to steal secrets for you from the government, commit treason, risk their lives possibly, or life imprisonment, their families' lives, your life possibly, and any number of things to get you those secrets. This is where the dangers go up exponentially. On top of that, if you are under diplomatic cover, you have that kind of layer of protection to a degree. You do, your asset doesn't, but you do.
Yeah.
But if you're doing what I was doing, which was NLC knock or non-official cover, that's when you're going in as a civilian. So if I'd have got caught doing what I was doing, that'd have been it. They'd have chucked me in a gulag or wherever it was, whichever country, and I wouldn't have seen the light of day again. So that's when the dangers are a hell of a lot worse. With that, you have a lot more training in the likes of escape and evasion and covert method of entry, that kind of thing, because you don't have that diplomatic condom, as I've called it a couple of times. So, but yeah, so that in itself. I mean, I used to love this work, but that's a whole process that sometimes you'll be given a person of interest and you'll say, can you infiltrate this person's life and recruit them as an asset? And sometimes they won't know and they'll say, we need to get this information, or we need just to get access to information, go and see what you can do. So you have to find your mark. You have to deliberately target the person that you want. You have to look at MI6 use three things, which is motivation, access, and security. Those are the three questions. What can you motivate them? It might be money, might be healthcare, might be any number of things, but can you motivate that person to do it? Have they got access to the secrets we want? And find the security. Is it secure for us to get that from them? And what are the danger levels to yourself and to that person? So
I mean, that leads. So we always used to get told about our security side and stuff like that, and always be on the lookout for. And this is a kind of leading question, I suppose, and you don't have to answer it if you don't want it. But we always used to get, the honey traps, stuff like that. Be careful of blackmail. If you're especially someone who's in financial difficulties and stuff like that, and they would, they lose their vetting because they are susceptible to being blackmailed or
that's right.
it's not money. Would we use the other way around? Would we go and, if we had information on somebody, would we be quite willing to use that against them to get them to do something?
So we would, but in all honesty, the like Western intelligence agencies prefer more carrot than stick. And like, so where is your kind of, your Russian agencies will prefer to kind of have blackmailing, or what they call compromat, blackmailing material, compromising material that they can use to extort secrets out of you. The Western agencies prefer to do it a completely different way. We want to form a relationship with somebody. We want to build on that relationship. It's done on trust. It's done on reward for what they do for us. And when you've kind of cultivated that relationship and you've done it for long enough, it really is it's an amazing thing. I mean, I'm still in contact with a lot of my assets that, they don't even, to this day, don't even know my name, even though I'm on YouTube all the time now. So they probably do now, but they know me as something else. But they know me as something else. And of course, I mean, these are people, I've been to their weddings, I've been to their family funerals, I've been to their christenings and all manner of things, because that relationship was so strong. And in all honesty, and this is the beautiful part of this, when we look at motivation, yes, sometimes it can be money, it could be medical treatment, it could be any number of things. But the majority of the time, if you've done a really, really good job, it's simply because I've asked them to. It's as simple as that. It really is. I've just said, look, I need this. Can you get it for me? And they've gone, leave it with me. And that's when you're doing a good job.
You're doing a good job, but they should be in a position they're in.
Yeah.
But that's what I suppose that's what you're looking for as well.
That's it, yeah. And so there are lots of systems in place for being able to kind of work out the kind of person that's liable to do that and the motivation behind it, and it takes not just a skill, but a fair amount of training to be able to look at somebody and say, all right, how do I build a relationship with this person so strong that within a very limited window, I can tell them I need this, and they're going to go, yeah, I'll get that for you, no problem. And that's something that, it's one of the kind of best kept secrets in the training of the Western intelligence agencies, to be fair. And this is the bit where I'm going to do my plug, if you don't mind, mate, because
No, go on.
what I've done is I've secured an army base down in the southwest, and I'm doing a 2-day event which is offering the psychological training given to intelligence officers. And we've got guys flying in from CIA, counterterrorism in Australia, military intelligence guys from UK. We've got all different types of people, and for the first time ever, we are offering that psychological training given to intelligence officers to the general public. So if anyone wants to come along to that, then the website is spyq.co.uk, and that will be the end of this month, October 2025.
I'll put a link in of all that in the show notes as well when we do it. That leads me kind of onto another question. So you mentioned about escape and evasion.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So how much training did you have in that? And are you allowed to say who it was by?
Do you know what? I don't know if I am allowed to say who it was by, so I better not. But what I will tell you is that I actually did go back myself at one point. So when I stopped working in the field for a brief time, I went back and did the training. They said, look, you know this stuff inside out. Can you come and train our boys? And that's been government, private, different areas that I've done for different, and I've gone back and trained in all sorts of things, from bits and pieces of the escape and evasion, the surveillance, the human intelligence gathering, and that kind of thing. So, so that was fun, and that was because I know you're going to get to it at some point anyway. That was a lot of the classroom talk. There was, you're brilliant at this kind of thing. Why don't you write a book? And that was what led me down the path of also having a sideline career as an author as well.
I was going to lead on to that with the question I was going to ask to bring that on, believe it or not. Was,
sorry. I'm sorry.
No, it's all right. That was like the next bit. Anyway, it's all right. You've wrote fiction and non-fiction books, right? Out of your fiction, and this is how I was going to lead on to it. So your fiction books, if you were to pick a character, one of your spy characters out of that, and put them in a real-world scenario that's happened, which one would you use out of them?
Ooh. Immediately, I wanted to go to a character in the book called Major Jackson, because he's actually based on a real American drill sergeant that I met once. And he was a man with like no filter. And it was absolutely, and he's the kind of guy who says what everybody's thinking, but nobody dares say anything back to him. But that being said, he was somebody who he was a bull in a china shop. So in all honesty, I would probably go with. I'd probably go with Marshall, who's one of the main characters in the trio. So the trio consists of Jensen, Marshall, and Darius, who are like a three-man team kind of thing, and they do a lot of what I do. They do a lot, private contracting work and that kind of thing. And every time they get themselves into a mess, they manage to magoo their way through it and get out of it and come up smelling of roses.
How much of the fiction books has got real life in it?
Tons.
From experience. Tons of it.
Yeah. So what I did with the first one, I deliberately filled it with that much tradecraft, like masses of tradecraft, because I thought I want to do what Peter Wright did with Spycatcher and see if I can get it banned. Because I thought if I get it banned, it'll go straight to number one. And unfortunately, it didn't quite hit the spot. And I put some. I even put a method in there that the Freemasons used to identify each other publicly without other people knowing. So I put some real juicy stuff in there, tons and tons of tradecraft. It didn't get banned. So I tried again with book 2, and I crammed even more tradecraft in book 2. There's only 2 things that I said I wasn't going to do in the books, and I thought I'm not going to teach people how to make IEDs. I'm not going to turn it into a Jolly Roger cookbook. It's going to, it'll have all the tradecraft in it, and I thought I'm not going to teach people how to make IEDs. There's no reason why anybody, as far as I'm concerned, would have a good reason to make one. There is a mild exception in book 3, which hasn't been released yet. I'm currently writing it, and I've put the technique in there on how to make an improvised hydrogen bomb. But I've
I don't
deliberately
think we're
been.
going to get the parts in B and Q though, are we? So
Yeah,
I think
no,
it's,
well, actually, you'd be very, very surprised. It's a lot easier than most people think. But that being said, the way I've written it in the book is very much like if somebody turned around and said to you, crack some eggs, chuck some flour, mix it up and stick it in the oven and you'll have a cake. That's kind of what I've done with this. So, they left the oven temperature off or how long or how much or what should weigh or what. I've just put the outline in there, but with not enough for anybody to be able to hopefully turn it into.
well, I mean, I imagine this information's out there anyway, but I'm not going to start searching for it. Or your fucking old oppos will come and find it.
Yeah, don't call me if you do.
Yeah, he told us like. I mean, in your non-fiction books, what made you decide to write them ones? So the ones that if I remember rightly, the one about lying.
Yeah, how to tell if
I should have
someone's
done
lying.
more research on this podcast.
Nah, that's
really
all right.
Sorry.
So that particular one, and don't laugh at the title, it's called How to Tell If Someone Is Lying, is actually based on a Google search. It was a way to cheat the algorithms. I was trying to use my brain a little bit. So it worked because it became a bestseller. So, but yeah, what I did with that one, it started way back from when I was working in human intelligence gathering. There's a certain protocol, as it were, when you're meeting your asset, and you will go to what we call the COP, or the clandestines operation property, and usually it's just a hotel. And you meet them, and you will sit, and the first thing you do, there's a set of questions you have to ask. And that is, are you in any danger? Do you think you've been compromised? Does anybody? And you go through these questions, and you ask them that many times. You get the usual no. Yeah, okay, and then you can crack on with doing your actual work. But on this one occasion, I asked the one question, and that was, has anybody from any other foreign intelligence agency, or suspected intelligence agency asked you to share information or secrets with them, or do they know about us meeting you? Now, any other time this person goes, no, yeah. And on this one occasion, he went, absolutely not. And I went, that's interesting. And I never said anything. I just, carried on writing, and whatever else. And I went through the motions with him, done what I needed to do. And at the end of it all, you've got to write out something called a contact report, and you have to do it all then and there while it's fresh in your head, so as nothing gets distorted and that kind of thing. And that was when I put suspected contact from other agency, and I put my reasons why and blah blah blah. And as it turned out, he had been compromised. There was another agency that and it actually worked out in our favour, and we ended up turning him into a double agent. So that was really great and worthwhile. But what it was the subtle shifts in his body language that made me aware of it, and I was somewhat of an enthusiast in body language anyway. So I started studying it more and becoming more interested in it.
I'm sitting very still now.
Well, what ended up happening? I ended up becoming ranked 9th in the world body language expert by global gurus, and that was something that kind of. And it's going to sound really, really horrible now because of a lot of the people who tried to be in that top 30 and worked really hard. For me, it kind of happened accidentally, like so many other things in my life. I started off at something like 28th and just kept going up and up and up. And when I wrote the books, it kind of, made it even, cemented it even more. So I've written a lot in the book about body language, about statement analysis, the psychology behind it and that kind of thing. And I think a lot of people have found it really, really interesting.
Do you think if somebody's trying to mask their own body language and, to try and cover that they're lying, can they do it? Or is it always a telltale?
Yeah, there are people who are better at it than others. And what makes the big difference is the stakes. It's as simple as that. Because, if I said to you, Andrew, did you go to the moon last night? And you go, yeah, I went to the moon. I had a great time. Then there's no stakes. You're not going to prison for life for it. You're not going to get executed for it. So you'd probably get away with lying for you because the stress signals are not going to be there. But when you've got somebody who is under pressure in an interview room and they're looking at, potential prison sentence or criminal record or any number of things or, losing their marriage or whatever the case may be, and the stakes are higher, and the cortisol is flying through their body, and they know these are when the stress signals are going to be amplified, and that's when it's easier to pick up on the tells and notice when they're lying, and you'll be able to see all those little red flags, as they're called, or source leads, and then the other thing on top of that is I remember when we did our training, they did I can't remember, about an hour and a half. I think they sat me down with somebody, and it just appeared to be a conversation, very much like what you and I are having now. Ostensibly, it was just a chat backwards and forwards, a little bit of prying, but nothing too deep. And afterwards, they gave me the recording. They said, right, now go and watch that back. And they said, you are the only person who knows for sure exactly when you were lying. You're the only person who can know for definite when you were lying, because you know. And I said, so learn your tells. And then when you've learned your tells, learn to pepper them into everyday conversation, and learn to dilute them when you know you're being deceitful. And that's where, you start to learn, okay, I noticed I did this particular action or that particular movement, or look this way or look that way, or whatever the case may be when I was being deceitful. And then that way, then you learn to do those things when you're being truthful, and be more aware of them when you're being deceitful. And that helps to, kind of level the baseline, as it were.
I mean, that makes me I've just thought of another question there. So, for your line of work, or would somebody who's classed as a narcissist be good at it?
Probably, yeah. In some ways. So, yes, in the sense of they can happily and easily lie and deceive others. But the problem is, and this is more from my perspective. This isn't anything like on any official document anywhere or anything like that. But I know when I do the training and I teach, and I say, look, when you're recruiting an asset, it must be empathy driven. I said, if you're in this straight away for what can I get out of this person, I said, then you're not going to get very far. Now, if you're in this, like, all right, what can I do for this person? We've looked into motivations, but how can I really actually make a genuine difference and really make this person's life better? How can I build a relationship, get trust and rapport with this person so deep that I can actually just mention that I want something, and they go, yes, no problem, leave it with me, I'll get it done. And that's the only way to get that, is a real serious, deep empathy, and of course, if you're a narcissist, you're not going to have that. There's a lot of tropes as well in Hollywood, where the kind of, point a gun and they say, tell me now, and then 10 weeks later they're going back with another gun at his head, tell me. It doesn't happen. You'll only ever do that once, and that person will never trust you again.
Yeah.
You won't get information.
Yeah. That's kind of obvious. Somebody did that, I'd be like, he's not getting it again.
Yeah, exactly. So, and even then, they're not going to be friendly with it. They're going to give you minimal information, possibly wrong information. This is why the agencies favour carrot over stick. Because if you're threatening or compromising somebody, constantly dangling that threat, eventually it wears off. Eventually people get sick of it, or they start looking for ways out, or they're not going to do you any favours. They're going to deliberately miss bits up and whatever else. So, whereas if you're doing it on an actual real relationship, a real empathy-driven relationship, and you're trying to actually make that person's life better for real, then they're more likely to help you out in any way they can. I hope that makes sense.
Here's a question for you then. So, we see in the movies that you get, like, Philby and whatever, they know each other and sit down on a park bench and talk to each other about what's happening, and he's a Russian spy and he's a British spy and stuff like that. How often does that happen? Because I imagine it does, and I know you probably won't be able to tell us or speak about that, but I'd imagine it does.
Yes, it does, and I mean, generally we prefer to keep any kind of meeting as covert as possible, so as out of the public eye as possible, and it's not always possible. So sometimes it does have to be done in public. This is where you'll see, like, in a diner or something where they're in back-to-back booths and they're having a conversation, all that kind of thing. So it's not quite as over the shoulder as that, but it does, and can happen. I used to have to go to Belgium regularly to meet a guy who came from Russia, and we'd meet to say in the middle. We'd meet in Belgium. We'd have a cup of coffee. We'd have our exchange and whatever else, and that'd be it. So, but again, we'd got our different systems and whatever in place, but that was how it worked. So, but yeah, a lot of the time they try to keep it as, and generally hotel rooms are a favourite, to keep it as quiet as possible and out of the public eye. But yeah, I was gonna. I'll tell you about a little system that was used in London once with a Russian at the embassy in the UK, and we'd looked into him. There wasn't much leverage. There wasn't much in the way of motivation. We didn't know how to infiltrate. He was pretty clean all over, and we said, like, how are we going to get talking to this guy? And it was really, really difficult. The only thing that we'd got was the fact that he walked his dog in the park every morning at 7:00. So I borrowed a dog, and I walked the borrowed dog in the park in the opposite direction every morning at 7:00. And what I did is I built up that familiarity. That familiarity just kept building and building and building until I caught his eye. That turned into a smile. That smile turned into a good morning. That good morning became a conversation. The conversation became a friendship, and the friendship ultimately ended up becoming a recruited asset. Now, I've just given you that in 30 seconds. That took 9.5 months or something crazy to do.
I was just about to say,
yeah.
we see that stuff like that in the movies, and you don't appreciate the timescale of it.
That's
Like I said, to do that.
Yeah, it takes a long time, and of course, that's the downside with movies. Unfortunately, they don't have that ability to be able to explain, how many times you have to walk past somebody before they start recognizing you. And I did deliberate things. I deliberately wore the same coat every day, and I'd got like an all-weather coat, so no matter whether it was hot or cold or raining or dry or whatever, and eventually that familiarity and the, being in the same place at the same time allowed me to, give the smile or the morning or the, and build up that conversation and make him feel secure and safe enough to engage in conversation with me. So yeah, it does take a long time. There's two ways of doing this, you see. That's the one, and then the other is what they call the bump. And this is the more common one in movies for the sake of time. They try to profile somebody, get as much information as you can, and what happens to be or look like a chance meeting where you kind of spill their coffee, or you're in the line, in the queue with them at a particular shop or something, and you just get chatting to them and that kind of thing. The problem with the bump is you've got to get it smack on. You've got to get it right. And the only objective at the time of doing a bump is getting a second meeting. Getting the contact details of them if you can, getting a second meeting and making sure that it happens. You don't really need to get anything other than that, because at the second meeting you can then take things a bit further and progress it naturally from there. But if you catch somebody on a bad day, they've had a rough curry the night before and a few too many beers, or they've just had a row with their wife, or they've just had some bad news or a bereavement in the family, or any number of things, your chances have just diminished to pretty much a zero. And even on top of that, you don't know what other experiences have happened around the store or wherever else, or prior to the meeting them, and it's just very, very. It's not as it's a bit more risky. Whereas obviously the dog walk way that I did it, if I start a conversation and I don't get the meeting the next day, it doesn't really matter, because I'm going to see him in the park again the next day anyway. So that's something that I prefer that method personally.
Have you ever had an operative that you've had to get to defect or bring them in for their own safety and stuff like that?
Yeah, and I had a problem with it as well, because they were bringing good intelligence, which was great, and it was some real top-notch stuff, to be fair. That was, and I can't go too deep into it, obviously, for obvious reasons. But the problem was, I brought them in on the say-so of the people, the people who I was hired by. That's all I'll say on air. On the premise of a passport being given to them the other end, and when I got them back, they said, "No, we don't want to give the passport, and we want you to send him back, and we want another 6 months." I said, "This person's done." I said, "It's over." And we had we had a very, very big row, because they said, "Well, we'll let him stay here, but we're not giving him the passport, and we're not doing a name change, we're not doing this, we're not." I said, "No." I said, yeah. Anyway, we had a bit. It got resolved in the end. But what it was down to, I said, look, this is my promise. I said, and I made this promise on the strength of when I asked you, you said I could. I said, so by breaking your word, you're breaking my word, and I'm not letting that happen. So, but yeah, that's about as deep as I can get into the conversation without kind of crossing any lines, as it were.
I mean, I can imagine it's quite a difficult one, really. I suppose the only way comparison I've got is really like the interpreters in Afghanistan, the people who work with with the NATO forces or the ISAF forces in Afghanistan, and you want to bring them over,
Yeah,
to just to protect them because that's what they were told.
yeah.
There's that many that have been left over there who
Yeah.
we know are in danger, but
And
there's very very little we can do about it.
Yeah, it really is a shame, and especially when they've been told or promised that they'll be okay and we'll look after them. And again, this whole thing becomes more of an issue if ever we have to go back, and then we need to hire people again, and they go, no, we don't trust you because you told my dad or my cousin or my that the same promises or whatever the case may be. We don't want, and they end up working against you instead of for you. So. But
I think it'll be a long time before we go back over there. I think.
Yeah, hopefully not. I think hopefully it'll be a long time.
I think we're going to be a bit closer to home than Afghan. We're halfway, yeah. I reckon.
Yeah, yeah.
I can see that coming off soon. It's for what I heard the other week, anyway.
It's been a possibility for quite some time, and I think the chances are increasing regularly.
I mean, it must be an interesting time. For people who are doing your previous job now, I can imagine there's lots going on, type of thing.
Yeah,
and for us to say, they said, there's no one. We haven't got anyone in Ukraine. Yeah, right. Of course we haven't. It's. I wouldn't say it's common knowledge, but we're not fucking stupid.
No.
And the Germans said, "Oh, they have anyway." So, cheers, mate.
Yeah.
But I'd imagine it's quite an interesting period of time at the moment, almost Cold War-ish again.
It is, only worse. And the reason being, if you remember, so Cold War era, right before I kind of, was started officially working, as it were, Cold War era, our main area of concentration, our main threat was Russia. Yes, there were secondary threats, but that was our one main area of threat. Now, this is where people get a little bit confused because I actually worked, with a lot of Russian people when I first started, and they said, "Well, the Cold War was over back then. How come you were working with Russians?" And I said, "What do you think happened?" I said, "Do you think one day at the end of the mid-90s, somebody turned around and said, okay, then well, you stay over in Russia, we'll stay in America, we'll stay in Britain, and we'll trust that you will do exactly what we've told you to do." I said, "It didn't quite work like that." I said, there was a whole hoo-ha of making sure everybody was going to do exactly what they did, and everybody, the Russians were all selling each other out left, right, and centre to try and get whatever they could to get rich. And anyway, long and short of it was, and I don't know whether you know this or not, there's more Russian spies now in America and England, and more English and American spies in Russia now than what there ever was at the height of the Cold War. So that's how crazy it is at the minute. But now we've got the added problem where Russia isn't the only threat. China's a threat. The Middle East is a threat. There are threats all over the place. And whereas before, it was level one whack-a-mole, now, we've put the extra pound in the whack-a-mole machine and it's going a little bit faster.
Yeah. I can imagine. I mean, it's like, bugging each other's embassies and stuff like that, keeping an eye on each other's embassies. Yeah. I think North Korea is probably okay with that. It's just a bloke parked outside that house in the middle of a bloody council estate, isn't it?
That's it,
yeah. That's quite comical. I can't tell you what, I bet there's some stuff goes on in that one.
Oh.
I remember, can I mention this? No, I can't.
we'll talk.
Welcome to your world.
Yeah.
It was on a course I was on, and I mentioned so that we were on about like interception and stuff like that, radio interception. I was on a signals course, and they told us. I'll tell you after we finished. You probably know about it anyway. But they mentioned this story on it, and I was like, okay, fair enough. But I didn't know. We know not mention that because that again, people don't realise that when you sign the official secret act, it's for life.
Yeah.
And it's taken quite seriously. I mean, at my level is bloody, a Tom in the artillery type of thing. You don't get to know anything really untoward. Just what you're being trained with. I'm not, the stuff I'm going to get trained with. I'm not going to leak on War Thunder like most people.
Yeah.
And I'm glad they did because I just got that tank in War Thunder as well. There's nothing I'd know that would put the country or the armed forces into danger type of thing. Whereas people on a higher level, they slip up, say the wrong thing on social media or anything like that, and it can have proper detrimental effects.
Yeah, without doubt. I mean, I've actually still got the very last OSA I signed. I've actually still got it, the original one, in my file here with a load of other stuff. And of course, this is what people don't realise. It's not just about OPSEC. It can be sometimes the simplest, littlest things. And I know this because I've been on the other end of it, where that one little bit of information, that little breadcrumb, has allowed me to get to the next little bit of information, and then the next, and before you know it, that has fanned out and spread out and become an entire compromise of a particular government section or a plan or whatever the case may be that they're working on. So yeah, and as you can imagine, doing a podcast like this, every other word I'm going, right, where can I go with this? How much can I say? How many? Yeah, so I have to self-edit as we're going.
No, I can understand that. I'm trying to self-edit the questions, thinking, can't ask that. No. The social media side of things nowadays. Mm-hmm. You see that many people online, and I find it mad. I look on TikTok and stuff like that, and you have serving soldiers who are on TikTok going, "Oh, look at me! This is my room. This is this," that. And I'm just like, "Are you fucking stupid?" It's quite hard, quite easy for someone to find out who you are, where you are, that type of thing.
There's a guy who specialises.
It's not just the nasty guys.
Yeah.
The foreign actors that'll see stuff like this, and you can be quite easily approached.
Yeah. There is a guy on YouTube that actually specialises in, I forget his name, but he's really, really brilliant. And, they'll send him like a 10-second video saying, hey, whatever your name is, I bet you can't find me. Something like that, just a few seconds long. And he looks at that video and he looks at everything from trees to where that particular tree is native and narrows it down and narrows it down and narrows it down and, and searches it. I found you're in this park, in this state, in this country, and even to the point where I could tell that the sun was causing a shadow over this side of the park and now I know what time of day you were even there. And he's brilliant. Yeah.
A geoguesser, I think he's called.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, I've seen him, yeah.
Absolutely amazing. And of course, if he can do that, who's a member of the public, just off open source intelligence, imagine what the private and the government sector have got access to and what we can do,
I mean, there's another thing, open source intelligence. So it wasn't on my radar, let's say, until the invasion of Ukraine. Mm. And then you start looking on the live maps, the live map UK, the Ukrainian intelligence map. That's but that's all around the world.
Yeah.
I was quite when I found that and looked at it, and you see, and most of the information on there is brought in, I believe, from like Twitter feeds and Instagram and stuff like that. And people post on there, or they're posting something on Twitter. And it gets linked in, and somebody else just finds it, and it's really, really quick as well.
Oh yeah,
it's updated really, really quickly. But what surprised me was it's all around the world, and then when you zoom out of that map and you come away from the European sector, there's shit happening everywhere. Unless Trump gets his way, then he'll go by next week. He'll have ended all wars, but that's another matter. Yeah. But there's that much stuff going on in the world. But it just amazed me how accurate that intelligence was on Ukraine.
Yeah, and of course, being open source, there's a lot of dangers in it. We are literally saying, look at us, this is where we are and what we're doing. And, I mean, like I say, I would utilise stuff like that all day. Do you remember at the beginning when I said to you one of the very first assignments I was given was to find out how the Russians were getting railgun intelligence out of Korea? And the way I did that is I reverse engineered it. And I thought, right, how would I get railgun intelligence out of Korea? And what I did is I thought, well, I'd start by finding myself a railgun expert. You know, they're not McDonald's workers. There's not very many of them. It's a short list, you know. So I looked at you know the list of railgun experts around the world, and then I said, right, how many of them are in Korea? Well, that made the list a hell of a lot shorter. And then I looked a bit closer at them, and I did nearly all of this remotely. Looked at those a little bit closer, looked at the work they'd done, looked at all bits and pieces, looked at papers they'd published, looked at articles they'd wrote, and I came across just one, where the railgun expert had co-authored a article with a Russian diplomat. Oh, that's interesting. Then I looked into that and him a little bit further. And again, a lot of it was done remotely. I did it all from my living room pretty much. And I got confirmation that that particular railgun expert was like that with that particular Russian who had ties to the embassy and blah, 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 blah. And then as soon as I got it all confirmed, and that's why I did it in 2 or 3 days, you know, when I went back to my employer and I went, there you go, this is where where it's happening. And that was it, job done. So if you can imagine, that's how easy it is for me to find out all of that from my living room within 2 or 3 days and get it confirmed and get a file to my employer. Imagine how much this open source information and intelligence in real time, how valuable that is to our enemies.
Yeah, I can imagine. But I know quite a few guys, once they've left the military, have gone into, you know, that kind of industry, let's say. You know, there's a few of them who I know who are ex-SRR. And I've tried to get them on a podcast. I go, no, we're still in it. You know, we're not in it, but we're still. You know, we can't be seen type of thing. Like, oh, right, I thought you were out of the army. We are out of the army, but it's just no. You know what I mean? The private sector is just as cutthroat as that type of thing.
Yeah, if not worse. And you'd be surprised how many times. So especially the CIA, their station chiefs will send somebody between them and the actual. They'll send somebody out, like they'll hire private contractors like me. I've had no ties to tell somebody because they don't want their staff and their intelligence officers and American forces tied up doing the kind of crap that I can do a lot quicker, a lot cheaper, and a lot easier. And they haven't got to tie up, for want of a better word, their best staff when they can get an idiot like me to go and do it, So I was hired a lot to do a lot of work for different allied governments. And of course, I'd be out in Europe and doing surveillance jobs quite frequently, but it's not an uncommon thing for the government intelligence agencies to occasionally turn to the private sector. In fact, I'd say now probably between 70 and 80% of allied intelligence are nearly all private contractors.
Bloody hell.
Crazy, isn't it?
I'm surprised at that because they probably cost more.
They do, and that's it's a bit of a way. It's got worse and worse. I say worse and worse. It's got better and worse in 2 different ways. But if you look at like kind of even over at Langley, you've got somebody leave their job on a Friday, as an American government employee, and they will start again on the Monday morning doing the same job at the same desk in the same office, but on twice the pay. And
but what's the incentive? Yeah.
Well, that's it. And of course, if you're doing a job and somebody turns around to you and says, "Well, look, you're doing that for the government for X amount. Come and do it for me instead," and you'll be doing exactly the same thing, but you'll be getting twice as much. You'd be just, to turn it down, wouldn't you?
I suppose it's how driven you are, really. Because I mean, even if you go work in the private sector, you're not going to get access to everything that you're used to. And that's. So again, with the open source, it's probably 70% is good. I don't know.
Yeah, but there's a lot of private contractors still working at the HQ in Langley, but they're working for the US government, but indirectly. So you get one guy, he might be an office clerk at Langley HQ, and he works for the government, and the private sector say, look, come and do it for us. You'll work for us on the books. You've got your security clearance. We'll send you back to Langley doing the same job in the same place, but we'll pay you more. It's absolutely, it really is crazy how many they keep poaching, and more and more and more people are going to work in, for private companies, still working for the government, but under the capacity of what you've got what they call the green badges, which is what I was, or a blue badger. Now, blue badge at Langley are the permanent staff, and then the green badges are contractors. So anyone with the green credentials badge, they're contractors, they're private, and that's there's probably, like I said, I don't know, probably 2/3 now, I'd guess roughly, that are probably green badges there now.
Jesus Christ, it's just people getting too much money. That's what it is.
Yeah, yeah.
And then it goes the other way. I remember talking to a mate of mine who was, and this was, oh God, quite a while back, but he was stationed in London with the SRR. And he was he was there for 2 years, and he was just travelling around, that type of thing. And they would quite often partner up with, as he called it, the civil service. And they would sit in a car with them, and they would be more disgruntled that he was getting paid a lot more than them, to do the same thing. And I was like, oh, God, they must be on a fortune. He was like, no. It's a pittance of a pay considering, compared to what they do. The pay in the public sector is not that well.
Oh, not well. But there are pros and cons to both, and I know because I have worked in both areas. So, because I remember my entire career, mostly as a contractor, being so envious of all the full-time civil servants. And, they've got holiday pay, they've got sick pay, they've got pensions, they've got all these things that I didn't have. Basically, for me, if I didn't work, I didn't eat. And I wasn't guaranteed. So there was no contract. It was a case of, can you come in for this particular job? It'll last you about 3 months, invoice us at the end, and job done. Now, when that was finished, it might be 3 days before the phone rings again. It might be 3 months. It might be 3 years. And of course, what happens is, and it always happens, you'll get nothing for weeks and weeks and weeks, and then you'll get 3 phone calls in a day of 3 different people with 3 different jobs, and then you have to decide which one to pick. But yeah, and I remember that whole scenario of being envious of the full-time staff with all those perks. So I did what I was trained to do and got myself into the civil service, only to find that when I did it, the grass wasn't greener. I hated it. It was just the bureaucracy of it all, and I just, didn't like it at all.
The bureaucracy and the dead man's shoes, basically, as well.
Yeah, and the pay drop.
Yeah. I mean, we always understand, or we always get led to believe, that there's a lot of animosity between MI6 and MI5. They don't like to share information. That's the way it's portrayed in the press and in the movies and stuff like that. Did you find any of that?
I mean, as a contractor, no, because wherever I was sent to work was, I'd just get on with the people who I had to work with. But the truth of the matter is, MI5 and MI6 don't really have that much to do with each other. They're kind of, but there is this bit of a misconception, and the misconception is that MI5 don't work abroad; they only work in the UK, and that MI6 only work abroad and don't work in the UK. And that's not the way it works. That's not the way it is.
To be fair, that's what I thought.
Most people do. So, what to simplify it, imagine you're watching a target who lives in Bradford, right? And you've got your eyes on him, and you think he's a domestic threat to the UK. MI5 are watching him, and all of a sudden he gets on a train down to London, and then he buys a ticket to get on to the shuttle to Paris, and you go, we've got to keep eyes on this guy, right? MI5 will send people to Paris. They will probably work with DGSE, maybe. It all depends. We do a lot of joint operations with the French, and the DGSE are really, really helpful. We share a lot of intel with them. But they will, in those instances, operate outside of the UK, right? So that's an example. That's a plain and simple example. Now, because at the end of the day, the UK are looking at domestic terror threats. But that person, if they're a British passport holder, goes to France and then goes to somewhere else and then meets people and then comes back again, and they are potentially a domestic terror threat. Now, the SIS or MI6, they're looking at foreign threats to the UK. But sometimes those foreign threats jump on a plane, land at Heathrow, and they are operating in the UK. Sometimes those foreign threats are diplomats working in London. They could be, they could be watching the Russian embassy. Now, even though it's on British soil, they are foreign threats. So it's still down to MI6 to keep tabs on them. So, but because of just to simplify things for most people, they go, yeah, MI5 is inside the UK, MI6 is outside the UK, and that's how most people think. Oh, okay, yeah, and they don't realise that the two actually do operate in.
Which makes sense. It makes perfect sense. Yeah.
Well, can you imagine if every time somebody left the country, can you get over and follow him? And I've got somebody coming into England. Can you get someone? The amount of cross investigations and things like that. Oh, it'd be an absolute nightmare.
You'd have to have a QRF of people sat there, wouldn't you?
Yeah. Can you imagine and the paperwork? Oh, yeah. Now, it'd be, and there are occasions as well when there are joint operations, joint agency operations, and that kind of thing. So the two worlds do merge. So, but as for animosity, most of the time not. Most of the time they're doing their own thing and don't really actually have that much to do with each other. They don't need to.
I mean, that leads me on to, say we've got MI5, MI6, and then we've got, say, the National Crime. I can't remember the name of it now.
National Crime Agency or the...
it's the National Crime Agency. I mean, there must be a lot of linking in between there as well.
Yeah, so because MI5 will generally use Special Branch, or they'll use SO15 and that, because MI5 don't really do much in the way of like the hands-on arrests or anything like that. They might be present for it possibly, but their job is information. When they've got the information and they know that a particular person is a problem, that's when they'll pass it on to SO15 and say, right, go get him. And they will also work with special forces and monitor others. And I've got to be careful what I say here. I'm going to stop at that. But yeah, they generally that's how it's handled. And with MI6, and again, this has been a bit of a thing. I've worked with a lot of MI6 guys where we've had to kind of have special forces go with us to particular places. And they are a different breed because they're special forces. They're great guys, wonderful guys, love them. But sometimes you have to tell them to tone it down a little bit. It's like, we're meant to be in disguise here, guys. And what it is, some of them wear it like a badge because of the fact that, it's been their life. The military has been their life, so it's something that they kind of, to them, they're proud of, and I can fully understand it, what they've had to do to get to where they are. So it's sometimes you have to go back and say, no, fellas, looser suits, yeah.
Stick some jeans on.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, we don't want to see the guns. Yeah, we don't want to see the biceps when you're checking the time on your watch. We want that covered up. That's it's got to be there as a surprise. So, but
one question I've got for you: powers of arrest.
Powers of arrest.
Do MI5 have powers of arrest?
Not usually. Under most circumstances, they don't. And even under a lot of the extreme circumstances, they can only usually do something akin to a citizen's arrest. However, there is an area I wasn't going to say too much about, but I will. I think some people may or may not know about this. I don't know, but there's not really a terminology to kill or assassinate somebody or arrest somebody or whatever else. What there is a very ambiguous term called a hard stop.
Yeah.
And that is if somebody is an imminent threat on a grand scale. I don't quote me on the terminology here because I don't know. I wouldn't like to say verbatim what it is. But if you really genuinely think that somebody is a threat then and there to the public on a grand scale, and they're going to perform an act of terror, then you can get given the command to do a hard stop. And in very loose terms, that means stop them no matter what. Now, that's then down to you to interpret how you do it, whether it's crashing a car, whether it's caving their skull in with a brick, whether it's whatever it is, or whether it's just hitting them on the back of the head on the off button. You have to make the decision. It's your call.
Yeah, I mean, and you have to make that decision that could live with the rest of your life, because as we've seen from the London Underground, it sometimes goes wrong.
Oh yeah,
unfortunately, and how many times has it gone right that we haven't heard about?
A lot more. Yeah.
I'd rather it be that way, to be honest.
Yeah.
Have less. I mean, it's like the old days. I suppose, how can I liken it? Like, say in the early 80s when I was in Ireland. Early 80s, in the late 80s when I was in Ireland. I'm not that old, bloody hell. We'd be over there, or we'd be doing the training coming up to it, and you'd be getting all the intelligence and the daily sit reps and stuff like that. And all of a sudden, you're like, from knowing nothing about the place to going, shit, this is happening. This is happening. That's happening. Why isn't this on the news? Why isn't this common knowledge that all this stuff's happening all the time?
Yeah.
And the answer is that because we don't want to scare people. You don't need to know it to live their life over in Leeds.
Yeah.
You don't need to know that something's happening in Belfast. And I'd imagine it's exactly. I don't imagine it is exactly the same as how we live. Oh, we don't need to know everything that's going on.
No.
Half the time, you'd never leave the door.
So, I mean, it's not just that. I mean, there's so much. It's not just the bits that they don't tell, but sometimes they will give information, and I'll be again. I'm going to use choice words here, so it's down to your followers to kind of read between the lines a little bit. But I'll be involved in something, and I'll watch the news report, possibly even that same evening, and I'm sitting there at home going, "That's not how it happened." I know that because I was there, and I've heard all sorts of stories from this happened. It was a gas explosion. It was an accidental collision on the A, blah blah blah. And I'm thinking that wasn't no accidental collision. Took me 3 attempts. So yeah, you do, there's the both sides of it. The whole kind of. The don't tell them everything, because if they knew everything that was going on everywhere all the time and every threat we stopped, there would be grand scale panic. And at the same time, the things that do make the news, sometimes you're not getting all the details.
And the thing is, there's enough scaremongers out there now, especially in the climate that we're in at the moment. There's the right wing, the left wing, this, that, and the other, and there's just people latching onto all sorts to try and gain favour, to gain votes and things like that, And it scares me that certain people could get in power. And I'm not a leftist, I'm not a rightist, and I don't mean that just about the right either. I mean about people on the left as well. If the wrong people get in power, they'd get this knowledge of what's happening. And I mean, Trump.
Yeah.
I mean, how many times did he get in trouble when he wasn't president? That type of thing. Why have you got them boxes in your toilet? I'm just having a read. It's kind of scary, because the world is a scary place.
It is, and this is the thing: you can't blame people for wanting a big bad. A lot of people are really, really scared at the moment. They're looking around at what's going on in the world. They don't like it, and they need somebody to blame. Things aren't great. The education system's falling apart. The immigration system is a shambles. The NHS is going down the pan. People are struggling financially. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of scary going on in the world that the general public, they don't know what to do and who to back for the best and whatever else. And a lot of it is also getting fueled by all sorts of claims on the internet. We're already in World War III. We're already looming on nuclear war. We're all going to die. And of course, the people, they are in fear. And it's a shame, and sometimes with good cause or good reason, other times not so much. But when they get all this, they want somebody to blame. They want, kind of like it's the government's fault. It's Tony Blair's fault. It's Margaret Thatcher's fault. It's Trump's fault. It's anybody's fault. They don't want to, and of course, by having that big bad, it makes them feel better because it gives them an outlet. But then what happens is they then get online and start spouting all sorts of things, and then it just fuels the flames even more, and it becomes perpetual.
I mean, it's like the last year with the riots. I was talking to a guy about it who was a bit more involved with the police side of things, and and I thought, it's a bit harsh, the sentence, and the arrest happened so quick, and the arrests were the sentencing was harsh. And the lass who wrote the Twitter thing and this, that, and the other, and Ben, the hotel and off the jail and for so long and everything, and everyone's like, well, they're using them as scapegoats, and I was of that opinion until I heard somebody else's opinion that changed mine, and it was a more sensible reaction to why it was so strict and why it was so harsh, because they weren't dealing with the way the government looked at it was they're not dealing with rioters, they're dealing with civil disobedience, and you can't have civil disobedience because it can lead to a lot worse. And that's why it was stamped on straight away. Whether that's George Orwellian or not, I don't know, but I kind of get why now.
So I mean, and again, I'm going to play devil's advocate here with you a little bit, Andrew, and the reason being, if there wasn't a hell of a lot of worse problems going on in the bigger cities around the UK, you can understand saying, look, that person with this Twitter post or whatever the case may be could cause civil disobedience with that. It does need to be stamped out. So I get that, and they've made an example out of it, and I understand that side of it. But when you look at what's actually going on around the UK, when you look at the crime rates, when you look at the fact that there's already civil disobedience, yes, that person, that one individual might be making it a little bit worse, but is it really going to stop it if she's in prison? Is it really, is it going to come to an end? And what's happened is the Barbara Streisand effect with the fact that that person's now been arrested, and that's actually made it worse. Because now people are going, to see, look, we told you it's George Orwellian, they're putting us, we've got no freedom of speech, they're imprisoning us for tweets. And then that's actually made more people then want to go out and riot and cause more civil disobedience. So I don't know whether you heard about the Barbara Streisand effect. It come from her photo, a photo of her house on the coast of California was on a website. And she basically caused such a hoo-ha trying to get it gagging order and get it removed. She said she didn't want people seeing her house, that it actually flared up and went viral, so much so that it had the adverse effect, and more people saw it than if she'd have just kept her mouth shut. Maybe,
for example, it's like the guys on, people on Google Maps.
Yeah.
Who apply to get their house blurred out.
Yeah, the people want to go look then.
I'm scanning about and that's blurred out. Why is that blurred out? And you start going back through the years. And you're exactly right. It just makes you more interested into it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Right, before we leave, because we've been on like an hour and a half now, and I know you're a busy guy. So what's your plans for the future then?
Well, apart from the big event that I've got coming up, I'm working on part 3 in the series of my book, which I'm going to tell everybody that book 1 in that is called The Unforgiven Spy, and it was my first fiction novel in the series. A lot of that is based very loosely on first-hand experience. So pretty much everything that's happened in that first book, I've been through one way or another. Sometimes it might only be in training or whatever else. The only exception to that is the main character, his wife and daughter gets kidnapped, and it doesn't matter how much I offer anybody, nobody wants to kidnap my wife. So so that bit's not true, it's made up. But that's book 1 in the series, and like I said, I've crammed it with tradecraft. So if you do like to know a little bit about the secret the secret side of stuff and what really happens, there's tons in there, and the same is in book 2, and book 3 is on the way. If the event goes well, I might even consider doing a second one of them too.
Question for you then. If anyone's listened to this and got this far, they've either got insomnia or they're really interested. What advice would you give to anyone who's thinking of either going into the industry from school, even, or leaving the forces? Leaving the armed forces and thinking of, because I mean, we've always had this influx of people leaving the armed forces and going into CP work and stuff like that, and again, Afghan half the special forces buggered off and go over there with better jobs and more pay.
Yeah.
But if you've got people who are thinking, what am I going to do when I leave the military? I could be a private investigator. I want to be a spy.
Mm-hmm.
What advice would you tend to give them, and what routes should they look at to go to?
I mean, depending entirely on what they want to do. If they want to go down the private investigator route, get into a company and get yourself a mentor that's had like years of experience of doing it, and get them to take you under their wing. And this is where you're going to rely on your infiltration skills and kind of making friends with that particular person. If anyone wants any advice on this, by all means, give me a shout, and I'll try and point them in the right direction. With regards to the intelligence community, the advice I say to most people is, if the intelligence agencies have got a use for you, you will always have a job. There are civilians out now in the Nevada desert working directly for the CIA because they can fly a drone. There are civilians I know who have worked directly for intelligence agencies because they speak 3 different languages. So, and what we've got now, we are heading into an age of AI, which is making our kind of work exponentially harder. So when I was in, I've had several different passports in several different names. I've gone to different countries, sometimes the same country multiple times with different names and different passports. That now is close to an impossibility with all the scanning they've got on the way in and all the facial recognition systems and everything else. It's a lot harder. So what the intelligence agencies are going to have to start doing in the future is using what's called clean skins. And that's somebody with no affiliation to government agencies who, has kind of left. And it looks like they have a reason to go to that country. Maybe it's for a job, maybe it's for a vacation, whatever the case may be. And they can say to them, look, while you're over there, this is what we'd like you to do. So, the bottom line is, if you can make yourself useful, then there will be a job for you within those agencies. You've just got to get your abilities and skills in front of the right people. And again, I know loads of people in the intelligence community, both, current, serving and former. I'm happy to give advice with this kind of stuff. But yeah, human to human skills, do your degree in psychology, learn as much as you can about rapport building and that kind of thing. Language is always a bonus. And obviously now in this day and age, computer skills are something else as well. But most importantly, a coachable attitude. You need that kind of ability to not think you know everything and have somebody teach you and be as willing to learn as you possibly can be. Does that make sense?
And I suppose in the modern world, if you can hack in Russian, you're definitely going to get a job.
Exactly, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you said, you mentioned there AI, and I was just thinking, fucking hell, yeah. It's. I don't think people realise how much that's going to take over everything.
Mm-hmm.
I work in IT, and it's already impacted on me personally. AI. I mean, I wouldn't say it's made my job easier.
Yeah.
If I get stuck, it's like anything. You can't know everything.
Mm.
And especially in something like IT, it's such a broad, encompassing subject. It's everything. And you can't know it all, and you can't be a massive expert in anything. So, most of the time when you ring up Curry's for help with your email, they're Google foo. That's what it is. That somebody stopped doing Google, going, oh yeah, and it's great. But AI brings all that in together, which is great. That's the good side of it, and we can make nice little pretty pictures and, make my eyebrows smaller, whatever with AI. But it's the other side of AI where it's going to have the ability to hide things.
Yeah.
And as much as it is easy at the moment to track IPs and track people and track mobiles and stuff like that, I think in the not too distant future, all that's going to be really, really hard. And it's going to be dangerous. I don't think the average person realises how susceptible the country is to a cyber attack.
Oh, yeah, rapidly. And we do get them regularly, and again, this isn't always put on the news either because of the fact that we don't want people scared. Vodafone's gone down against cyber attack. This has happened against cyber attack. That's gone down against cyber attack. Because if every one of them was reported, then they'd realise the extent of how many times we do get attacked by hostile forces, as it were. So the majority of the time it's just an apology. Yeah, something's gone wrong, glitch in the system. It'll be back up in an hour or two, and they do their best to kill it and sort it. So
yeah, I mean, I've heard the normal excuse is, we've had a switch gone down in a data center.
Yeah.
Have you? Haven't you got backups? Yeah. Well, I mean, and we are seeing it more and more. People like Cloudflare getting taken down, and you take Cloudflare down, and that's like nearly half of the internet gone.
Yeah.
When it went down last year, the beginning of this year, literally half the internet in the UK went. But some of that internet could be in control of power stations,
and that's the problem. Yeah.
And that's the thing, is we're very susceptible to it. Anyway, before we digress anymore, I'll say thank you for coming on. I've really enjoyed it.
All, Andrew.
I hope I haven't been too amateurish for you.
No, I've enjoyed every minute of it, and thank you.
It's been really interesting, actually, honestly. I've really enjoyed it. And I am going to, once I finish the question for you, audiobooks, do you agree with them or not?
I do, and I'll tell you for why. There are people sometimes who have long commutes in cars or whatever else, and even though I'm a reader, as a rule, as you can see, the bookshelf behind me is crammed full of all types of literature. I'm still somebody who, wintertime, summer I shower, wintertime I have a long relaxing soak in the bath, and when I do, I'll put an audio book on and listen to it, because I like to utilise my time to the best of my ability, and I like to learn as much as I can and when I can.
I have a more guilty reason. I'm just too fucking lazy to read a book.
But the thing is, different people have different ways of enjoying things. Some people watch movies, some people listen to audiobooks, some people read, whatever else. It's horses for courses. There are also people out there their eyes just wouldn't allow them to do it. There are people who have issues with their eyes, and they read a page or two, and by the time they got to the bottom, their eyes are streaming with water and they're straining to see. And it's a labour for them to do it. So for those people, or people who are partially sighted, and anybody who just generally struggles with a book, if they can get the enjoyment out of an audio book, I don't blame them at all. And I've got to admit, the guy who did my audio book for The Unforgiven Spy, Scott Fleming, I couldn't have asked for a better narrator. He did a brilliant job. He did all the accents. He did absolutely fantastic. So yeah,
right. I mean, that was, I didn't realise it was an audiobook.
Yeah,
so I'm putting that on my list, and yours is the next one. No, I've already got one. I've got to listen to one. Yours is going to be the one after that.
Oh, fantastic!
Right.
Well, I hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, and again, the reason I do that is, I say it. I used to read a lot, and I don't anymore. It's too time consuming. I can just sit in my car, drive along, listen to the audiobook, and it's great. And I'm glad you got a good voice actor for it, because
oh yeah,
there was one I listened to last year, and I know this is digressing again, and we should be ending it now. But I listened to one last year, and it was about the Rhodesian SAS. It was an eye opener of a book, the rise and fall of Rhodesia and stuff like that. Very interesting. But the guy that got it to read it out, he's got to have been an AI voice. He really has. I couldn't finish it in the end.
Oh dear.
And I suppose it's the same as a podcast. If people don't enjoy what they're hearing, they'll just go.
Yeah,
type of thing. Anyway, right. So again, thank you for coming on. I've really enjoyed this. I'll just stop the recording now.
Okay.
I hope you enjoyed that podcast. I enjoyed recording it. If you could just hit the like button, and also if you could subscribe and hit the notification bell, that'd be great, because it'll help the channel grow. The more people will see it, the bigger it'll get, and the more guests I can get on, and the more people I can talk to. Well, I hope you enjoyed it, like I said. Look forward to the next one. Hopefully we'll be out next week as normal. Bye-bye now.